At the age of 15, he was the youngest ever brand ambassador for Britain's largest business conference, the Business Show. Also, at the age of 15, when people don't even think about starting businesses, he already made his first business exit, first company exit. He sold his company at the age of 15. And since then, he started his own company and he has successfully raised over $700,000 in funding from various sources, including angel investors, renowned angel investors in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, joining us all the way from the UK, our guest this week is Karl Swanepoel, the founder of Revolancer. Revolancer is a platform that helps independent professionals and freelancers barter their skills to build their service businesses. Let's hear from Karl about his story, his journey. Karl, thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here on the Be Your Own Boss podcast. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Cool. So, Carl, let's start with your story, like we always do on the Be Your Own Boss podcast. Let's start with your story right from the beginning. So, tell us about your parents, your siblings, your childhood memories.
Sure. Well, I was born in South Africa. I grew up there I was living there until I was about 10 years old or so. My parents are both not entrepreneurs in any way, shape, or form. They're both kind of have like quite strong academic backgrounds. My dad has been working as a lecturer basically his whole professional life. My mom is now a psychiatrist, but before that, she also worked quite a lot within universities. So nothing like what I'm doing now. Very, very different. I have a younger brother as well who, I think he's still figuring out exactly what he wants to do, but is also not, hugely kind of entrepreneurially inclined. So yeah, it's quite different.
So you're the first in the family to, but as a child growing up when in South Africa or later when you probably, later you moved to the UK, as a child, did you have aspirations to become a businessman one day?
From when I was probably about 12 or 13 or so, yes. Before that, I wanted to become an astronaut and all kinds of other things. But one thing that I always enjoyed from a very young age is creating things and also like kind of bringing people together to work on something together. So I think like those are two traits that I've always had, which definitely help with starting a business.
Right. And where did that like desire come from? That the desire to lead, to desire to bring people together, create things together.
Um, it's difficult to say. I mean, I really enjoy creating things. I really enjoy kind of making things that improve people's lives. And I wanted and still absolutely want to do that on a very large scale. And that's kind of what I'm working towards. I don't know exactly where that necessarily came from, but
Yeah.
I've noticed about myself, like I get a lot of enjoyment out of helping other people in some way. I wouldn't say like, in some ways I'm absolutely attracted to like leadership roles, but then in other ways I'm absolutely not. I'm not a big fan of like, hierarchies. I guess inherently, I don't sort of see myself as better than anyone else. I very much think that respect is something that, is earned, and so is, not respecting someone that's also earned. So yeah, but I mean, then again, I think probably a lot of the best leaders out there aren't like kind of obsessed with the idea of being a leader.
Absolutely. That's the sign of a good leader, to not to be obsessed. And leadership doesn't somehow we have this tendency to put leader as on top of a ladder, and everyone else at the bottom. But that's not really leader is like someone who's able to bring the be the catalyst and bring people together, and that's what you have been you're inherently you're interested in, right? Um, so tell us about that. Like, so after up to the age of 10, did you move to the, when did you move to the UK?
Yeah, well, I lived in Germany first for a couple of years and then moved to the UK. Mainly, well, initially in England, and then in the past couple of years in Wales.
All right, all right. And so once, like, tell us about your schooling part, and like at what time did you, at what age did you think that okay, you're going to start? Um, I believe you were doing it alongside your schooling when you were
Yeah,
freelancing.
well, I think alongside is probably quite generous. I mean, I was neglecting school massively and really focusing on trying to, start various kinds of online businesses growing up. So, I mean, but it was probably from when I was about 12, 13 kind of age, is when essentially that was what my focus was on. I was thinking that, if I learn how to make money online, if I build a good network, if I just have trial and error for a few years, then maybe I'll be in a position where when I kind of leave university or leave school or whatever, like be in a position to go into business full time, because I didn't want to go kind of get a traditional job. Um, so that's really what I focused on. I could have done much better in school probably if I was interested in concentrating on that. But from a young age, I realized that that wasn't the right thing for me to be focusing on. It led to a lot of kind of arguments with my parents and teachers and so on. But I was very headstrong, trusted my gut, and I then was in a very fortunate position to be able to go full time into kind of running and building a business out of formal education.
Right. That's yeah. I mean, I can imagine your parents must be really worried about like you not focusing on the academics. Since given that they both are from in the academics, I mean, your parents are your father is a professor, so it's like all the more the importance of education, and like hey, you must study and things like that, right? There must be a lot of pressure. And what kind of businesses were you starting in? Tell us about that. Like, what did you start with? What did that transition into?
Sure. Well, I mean, basically anything and everything. So I've tried setting up, drop shipping stores. I've tried doing like web development, online marketing, all kinds of services. Um, really like so many different things. I've tried like sort of buying and reselling all kinds of different physical goods. Um, I did another random things. I did like web domain kind of trading for a while. So buying short and sort of rare domain names and then reselling those at a profit. So I've tried basically everything, or at least a lot of different things. I certainly kind of lacked focus, when I was somewhat younger, but then I then again, like looking back, I don't think I would have done anything differently, because now I know a little bit about a lot of different things, and that to me is very very valuable.
Yeah, and I think that's really commendable and remarkable, really, that at the young age you were educating yourself in a different way, right? Rather than the academics, you were in your own trial and error. You're trying to figure out different businesses, and did it involve any kind of did you have to fund the businesses, like when you set up something, did you have to pay something from your pocket to build that business?
I mean, sometimes yes, but it would be like below 50 USD or so in most cases, especially at the beginning. Like, it would be kind of saving up pocket money and various other things like for a while, and then using that for it. I mean, at that point, and I think still to a large degree, like my most valuable commodity is my time and my sort of skill set that I've built up. But especially at that point where I really had a basically complete lack of funds. I mean, many of the projects I started literally with nothing. And that taught me a lot. It also now puts me in a position where I can, manage, kind of run a much tighter ship, because for such a long time I absolutely had to. And that's something I'm very grateful for. I'm very grateful actually that my parents didn't, just give me, like a lot of money to start a business or something. I mean, they didn't really give me anything, but they certainly could have given me something. Maybe not a small loan of $1 million like Trump, but they could have, given me something. But I'm very, very glad that they didn't, because I don't think that I would be in the position I am today had they done that.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And you've learned like every part of the business in your on your own, right? Um, so tell us about, like, when you built several businesses at the age of 13, 12, 13. Okay, how did things progress after that? Like, what happened to? Did you register a company on your own? Like, did you set up a company name?
Well, yeah, I mean, like essentially things became kind of, more and more serious as I was moving along. So initially it was, I'd set something up online for like nothing and make like $100 or something and be like very happy about it, like being 12 or 13 or whatever. But then as time went on, I was thinking more and more like, okay, how can I actually like build something that can not only sustain me, but actually, like grow and make a big difference and maybe sustain other people too. Um, so yeah, as I was going on, it kind of turned into more and more serious projects.
Brilliant, brilliant. And how did like when did you get the idea of Revolancer as a concept? When did that name come to your mind?
Well, the name actually came to my mind after we received a kind of a very threatening legal letter when about our previous name from a very large player in the field who decided to, maybe pick on some smaller players, even though they are worth billions for now.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, but essentially our new name is much better than the old name. Ultimately, I mean, the new name Revolancer, it combines revolution and freelancer, which is exactly what we are aiming to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that it combines revolution and freelancer, and so you're creating a revolution in the freelance world here, helping freelancers. Tell us more about that. Tell us more about like what Revolancer does really as a business, and how does it help people?
Sure. So essentially, we're looking to kind of fill the void of where other large platforms have just been letting freelancers down for, unfortunately, a very long period of time. And what they do, what's very common practice throughout the industry, is to take 20% of freelancers' earnings, if not more. And essentially to enforce that, they then don't let freelancers email their clients. They don't let freelancers video call with their clients, phone call, anything like that, so that they don't, establish contact off platform in a way that these platforms can't monitor, and then they lose out on money. But essentially, we don't charge commission fees. We allow people to speak outside the platform, and ultimately, our sort of goal is to prioritize freelancers and make their lives easy, because that way clients actually get the best possible product. They get the best value for their money if we're not charging freelancers a huge tax basically to be on the platform and disrupting their workflow, and all of this. So it's I think a very simple philosophy. It's a shame, frankly, that it's necessary to even be doing something like this, but it is, and we are. And well, I think we're already starting to make some change, but my goal over the next 5 to 10 years is to have a really change the space a lot for the better.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. What's your business model like then? I mean, if you're not charging freelancers a commission or something, and so what is the business model of Revolancer then?
Well, what's quite funny actually is if you look at a platform like Fiverr, who charge 20% to the freelancer and 5% to the client, so they're roughly a quarter of every transaction. If they would just charge all of their freelancers $5 per month, they would be making the same revenue that they doing this, the way that they've currently chosen to do things. So for the time being, we're kind of partnering with different companies that are looking to hire freelancers and sort of charging them to advertise their jobs and availabilities to freelancers on the platform. So that's kind of the B2B side. But then on the B2C side, we're going to have optional paid plans in the future for like power user freelancers as well. But the platform will always be available for free, and you'll certainly be able to get started and get to the point where you can then decide to pay for free on the platform.
Wow, that's brilliant. So this is like you're striking a balance between what the businesses pay versus what the freelancers have to pay, and then you're making it you're turning the other way around and looking charging the clients or the businesses rather than charging the freelancers who are trying to make a living out of doing a small job, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm. Yeah, and any particular incident or any particular testimony that comes to your mind that where a freelancer trying to do something and made a your mission, your company has made a difference in their life. Anything that comes to mind?
A lot. I mean, we get a lot of I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn and emails every day. But so we also get, just as a company in general, a lot of people reaching out, very positive messages, which is really fantastic. But I suppose one thing that probably shows some promise is the largest influencer in the freelancing space, who was for a long time known as the Fiverr millionaire, Alex Vasulo, who has, I think, 840,000 followers or so on social media. She is kind of now endorsing Revolancer, which is really fantastic. And she mentioned us in a Business Insider article that she wrote, and a bunch of other things too. So I think that's definitely a nice testimony.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and more to come because there are. I mean, the kind of work that you're doing, I'm sure it'll be recognized a lot more. But when you look at your life as a businessman now versus you don't have your own reference as a job life because you didn't work for anyone else, but then you've seen your parents, working in a job, right? So what is it about being a businessman that you enjoy the most? What is it that you like the most?
I think it's probably the freedom and flexibility, even though in many ways you have less freedom and flexibility. But I think just overall, like, I think if you work, and I mean, and I did work experience actually for a risk assessment company in London for a couple of weeks when I was 15 or 16, and that helped me really just absolutely understand that this is not for me. I think the main thing is that what's really important to me, and this is absolutely the culture in our company as well, is that the best idea is the best idea. It doesn't matter who proposed it, right? And I think that in a lot of traditional workplaces, there's a lot of hierarchy that gets in the way of that. So even if you see an issue with something, or have a very good, much better idea, oftentimes the boss doesn't want their ego hurt, and and it's their way that sort of wins, and that's absolutely not how we do things at Revolancer. I frequently say to the team, even if my ideas get shot down every single time, that's absolutely fine if the company is then, choosing and going ahead with the best ideas. But I think that there aren't many companies that think like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very important lesson here in terms of culture, to have that kind of a culture in the company. How big is your team?
Ooh, good question. I mean, we're hiring for a bunch of roles at the moment. We're just under 20 now, I think.
Oh,
Just under 20 now and growing.
wow. And when in your business or in your company, okay, and this is kind of a culture question here. If you take your company, your as in your employees, your team, you've got your clients who pays the bill for and you've got your uh, the investors whom you need to make money for the profit part, right? When you look at these three elements, what's your order of importance? What comes first in your employees, clients, investors?
Well, I mean, it's worth mentioning that we are heavily loss-making at the moment, by design, because we're essentially looking to grow at a very fast pace, and that's exactly what the investors who are backing us are looking for as well. Um, I mean, I wouldn't say like sort of any one of them is much more important than another one. I think there's a fine kind of balance between those things. Um, but I think, if you get the balance right and do everything really well, then there's a chance that everyone's happy.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. This is so it's a balance, and that's what your business is all about, like to strike a balance with industry. And tell us about the investment part here. Like, I mean, we've got, like we mentioned in the introduction, that you managed to raise $700,000 to fund the business. How did that go? And this is like, I would like you to kind of elaborate on this, because this is very, very important for the audience who want to start a business and they want to go out and get investors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kind of initially when I started Revolancer, I started it with basically nothing in my dorm room at university halfway through my final year. I then briefly, after kind of coming up with the idea for Revolancer, I saw that my university had a startup competition, where you could pitch your business to a panel of judges, and then the winner wins some seed money. So I did that. I spent about 2-3 months absolutely obsessively focusing on this competition, like learning everything I could about previous winners, everything I could about kind of the judges, tailored my pitch quite effectively to that, and then I won both of the main prizes in that competition, which was about probably 15,000 USD or so, like 5,000 USD, which is was at that point far more money than I had ever had to start a business. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of money to start a business at all. But essentially, with that, I then spent the next 6 months kind of bringing a couple co-founders on board, building the platform, getting to the first like 150 users or so. And then, it was time to raise a larger pot of funding, because at that point I wasn't, kind of paying myself at all. Or like basically no one at the business was being paid at that point. But then when it came to raising external investment and a much larger amount, I reached out to other founders who had previously secured funding, and I learned from them. And then in kind of meeting with them and working with them a lot, I then started reaching out to investors myself. I was lucky enough to have a couple of introductions as well. And then when we actually went to raise the pre-seed round, we raised the whole amount in basically in 2 days. I mean, obviously there was a lot more. There was like a few weeks after that of due diligence and wiring the money and so on. But we had all of the funds committed within 2 days and like 3 meetings. So that was, an incredible experience. But it couldn't have happened without, speaking to and learning from people who have done that before.
Yeah, and when you go and pitch to investors, there are a lot of questions and sometimes, well, often uncomfortable questions that come your way about the businesses. Do you remember any such question that came your way about how you're going to make money, and what was your response to that?
I mean, at the time we had a different kind of model. So at this time we were thinking about basically still charging a commission fee, but basically, just a much fairer commission fee, because in my humble opinion, 20% is not fair at all. But essentially, we changed tack then a few months later and removed commission fees completely and looked at other means of monetization. Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of difficult questions, but ultimately the important thing is to be honest, but also to read between the lines of what they're asking, because oftentimes people will have a specific concern, but maybe they haven't quite realized it themselves, or they don't want to just, blatantly come out and say it. And then they'll ask you a question that kind of hints at that concern, but the question is actually something else. And it's about, and this is, something I've kind of worked on over time, but just kind of being able to spot with some degree of accuracy, what are they actually asking? What are they actually hesitant about? And then giving them, the answer or reassurance that they need. Or frankly, if it's not for them, then, we, kind of both politely move on and with our days, and I speak to someone else who it might well be for.
Right, right. So there are a couple of things here that you've mentioned. I think it's very, very, very important. One is to be able to spot the concern behind the question, and the other is to be honest and open about things and say that it's a matchmaking. It may work, may not work, and if the match doesn't work, you just move on with a smile, and that's brilliant. And when you know look at this time frame, I want to get an idea about the time frame part here as well. So how long has it been since you first raised the $15,000 to now, that the size of the company that you've built so far?
So it's been about slightly over 2 years from that point. We're now just starting our seed round, so we're raising multiples of what we've raised total to date, which is really exciting. Where that can bring us as a company. But yeah, it's been about 2.5 years or so since we got started. With the platform has been live for just under 2 years now, between 18 months and 2 years. And yeah, and I mean, for a while when we launched the platform, we grew what I thought at the time was fast, and compared to now is certainly not. So it took us a few months to get to 1,000 users, and now we're getting more than 1,000 users every day. So
Wow.
it's certainly accelerated a lot, and it's a very exciting journey.
Brilliant! Wow, and that's incredible growth in a couple of years. Carl. So um, when you look back at the time when you started versus now, the kind of business that you've grown, and the journey that you've had, uh, who would you like to give the credit to, or who are the people that you'd like to thank for your success?
I mean, probably first and foremost, the people sort of close to me, because like my partner, friends, family, etc. Because I mean, being an entrepreneur is not easy if you're doing it right, and it can be a very difficult road, and it's very important to have a good kind of sort of personal support network. But then outside of that, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't have achieved nearly as much as I have at quite a young age, if it wasn't for lots of people who have achieved a lot, who I reached out to and bugged and tried to speak to and learn from. if it wasn't for their generosity in helping me out. And still, I still speak to lots of people on a regular basis who have achieved a lot throughout their careers, and learn from them, so that I can learn faster myself. And well, I'm very grateful for that.
Brilliant. There is one thing I want to ask about the investment part, and when you when you go out and raise funds and bring in a lot of investors, right? With every fundraising, you give out a share of your company, and so like for I've got this question from a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, and this is why I want you to explain, being in that shoe, that how does it work, like what portion of your company do you still own, and then what portion out there is given out to the investors.
Sure. Well, in our case, between my co-founders and I, we own about 70%. About 10% is owned. It's kind of an employee stock options pool, so it's owned by the people who work for us and advisors, etc. And then the remaining 20% or so is owned by investors. I think a key thing to think about here is you aren't like giving away a part of your company. You are increasing the amount of shares. You're kind of issuing new shares and giving those to investors. So, you still have the same amount of shares, but you aren't like sort of sending your shares to the investor. You're making new shares and giving it to the investors. So you in theory still have in practice, you still have the same amount of shares, but the pie has become bigger, and the pie is becoming bigger because, the investors bringing money to the table and buying new shares that the company is issuing. And I know that lots of people have, big concerns about giving away sort of portions of their company. But then again, I mean, think about it this way. Would you rather own 100% of your local corner store? Would you rather own 0.001% of Google? The bottom line essentially is there isn't a wrong answer to that question. I mean, obviously the Google example will make you much wealthier. But it's about, doing what's right by you. And if you don't want to be sort of accountable to any investors or shareholders or so, and you just want to do your thing and not be accountable to anyone, and maybe not at a huge scale, and that's what you're happy with, then absolutely that's what you should do. But if you have ambitions to build a very, very large company on a very big scale, you absolutely can't do it by yourself, and you have to be willing to share so that everyone can have a smaller piece of a much, much bigger pie.
Absolutely, and it's all about building that pie. You're building the pie, and in this process, like in your experience, have you had any investors intruding into the decision making and making things difficult for you?
Absolutely not. But that's also because I have spoken to lots of other founders who have had investors who sort of act like that, which frankly isn't in the best interest of anyone, right? Because if you're investing in a company, you kind of need to trust the founding team, the kind of leadership team, to make the right decisions, even if if it maybe doesn't make sense to you, or you disagree. You kind of defer to that because they are there every day. It doesn't mean they can't make a mistake, but ultimately they're probably going to know better. And if you as an investor then trying to interject your own opinion, it could cause issues. I mean, absolutely, like suggest things and have a conversation. But the horror stories I've heard is where investors like sort of try and overrule and all this kind of stuff, and it just never really turns out well, unless the founders maybe completely gone off the rails. But that's different. But I'm also very picky in the investors who I choose to work with. In terms of who I reach out to, in terms of in a pitch call, I'm sort of finding out about them and judging whether I want to work with them just as much as they are, doing with me. And then, I so far, all of the investors we have are lovely. I highly respect all of them. Many of them have suggested lots of, kind of great ideas and things that we have integrated, but none of them have kind of, try and come along and, bulldoze their opinions through or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, definitely, as a founder, you also have to, be a little bit picky about who you work with.
Yeah, yeah. So luckily, no investor bullying here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Carl. For the audience who would like, who are, for those the freelancers among the audience, people who would like to reach out to you and be part of your network and grow, benefit from the services that you provide, or the businesses that would like to benefit from the services that you provide. What's the best way to reach out to you?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you want to, check out the Revolancer platform, then just Google Revolancer. And if you want to reach out to me, then LinkedIn is probably the best way. So if you just again like Google my name or search me on LinkedIn, it'll come up and you'll be able to contact me.
Definitely, and I mean, you're quite popular, so yeah, googling your name itself is like enough to bring in the results. But we're going to include the link to your website and your LinkedIn profile in the show notes and in the description for YouTube, so people can kind of know how to get how to reach out. One final question before we wrap up here, Carl. How was your experience being on the Be Your Own Boss podcast?
It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed kind of talking about lots of different things. Fun always being it's always fun being introspective about experiences growing up and how that maybe influenced where I am today. But ultimately, the bottom line is that I hope it's been helpful to at least one person listening in the audience. And hopefully something that I said today can help improve someone's situation in some way.
Absolutely, and that's my hope as well. And this is the reason why I do this podcast here. That someone somewhere gets inspired by one single sentence. Sometimes just one line can change lives. So, and that's the hope. And well, Carl, thank you so much for taking our time and sharing your journey, sharing your story with us. It was a wonderful conversation, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was Karl Swanepoel, the founder of Revolancer, and you've been watching and listening to Be Your Own Boss.